Hey, how's everyone doing? So, the next topic I'd like to move into is amateur drafts and what's going on right now in the NBA in terms of what some players are now doing to avoid going to college. And two of the players that are catching the attention of the news right now and media outlets all around the world in terms of basketball are Jalen Green, who is the number one ranked prospect in terms of the 2021 NBA draft, as well as Isaiah Todd, who is the number two ranked prospect. And it's very interesting what's going on right now in the NBA. Since 2011, since David Stern in his last year, I believe, as commissioner of the NBA, as he was in office between 1984 and 2014. One of his last duties was to take the NBA draft age requirement, which was previously 18 before 2011, which allowed players like LeBron James, who would be one of the most famous cases of the top player that came out of high school, came out of St. Vincent St. Mary's, and was able to have a very successful NBA career, obviously, coming out of high school. And there's many other players that have done that. The last player that was drafted, to my understanding, out of high school was Amir Johnson, former Toronto Raptor, but in 2011, David Stern changed this rule, and from then on, the NBA raised the eligible draft age for the NBA draft would be 19 years old. This basically was labeled as a rule that would force players to go and play in a college or go overseas and play for 1 year, and this rule was ultimately termed as and what's known as to many basketball fans is the one and done rule. And what we're seeing right now is a little bit of a statement being made by some of these eligible players that are looking to, or players that are about to be eligible for the draft that are 1 year away, that are looking to not go to college. And some fans would say, well, why wouldn't somebody want to go to Duke? Why wouldn't somebody want to go to UNC? Why wouldn't somebody want to go to Kentucky and compete for all-time coaches such as Mike Krzyzewski at Duke or at UNC, Roy Williams, at Kentucky, John Calipari? All have coached superstar and legendary NBA players. Why wouldn't a top prospect out of high school want to go and play for one of those coaches? Well, some of those players are looking to earn money as soon as possible. Some of those players have family to take care of. Some of those players don't have any money to afford to go to college. And while, many usually the top players in the country in terms of high school basketball players will be given a full ride, this is a little bit misinterpreted. And if you want to watch somebody talk about the misinterpretation of the full ride scholarship in the NCAA, be sure to watch some content regarding some content of Richard Sherman, who is a current player for the San Francisco 49ers and former NCAA football player at the University of Stanford in California. And he talks a little bit about some of the difficulties of being a NCAA athlete. You have to go to class, then you have to go to practice, then you have to go to lift weights, then you're going to eat lunch. So kind of the full day of an NCAA athlete and how difficult it is to be successful. He was an athlete that has had obviously a lot of success in his professional career as part of the Legion of Boom, one of the legendary secondaries with the Seahawks, now plays for the 49ers. And he's one of these athletes that has played NCAA football that has still been able to maintain, I believe he was, I want to say he was a 4.0, or he was close to it. He was a very good student in terms of what we know and what he's told us, and his NCAA academic record, and in terms of, a great football player. But he talks about how this full ride scholarship, well, it's not really as luxurious as you think. That, not all of your meals are necessarily being covered. It costs a lot of money to feed yourself, and there's a lot of other expenses that add up, and some of these university athletes and college athletes in the NCAA are just not able to afford. Not able to afford to do this, even with a full ride scholarship. So what the NBA is doing right now is they are giving the opportunity for some of these players that might fall under that category of those who cannot afford to go to a school, or those who just want to start making money right away. They're offering them an opportunity, elite prospects coming out of high school, an opportunity to, play 1 year in the G League, to sign to a six-figure contract. I believe that last year the G League was handing out $125,000 contracts to those type players. I don't know what it is this year, but it'll be interesting to see what happens with both Jalen Green and Isaiah Todd, and with them, I believe, both signing in the G League for a six-figure contract. Whether this experiment of players skipping college works, and when I say works, I mean, are they still going to be successful NBA players? Where are they going to be drafted now? Because they're not ineligible for the draft. One of the prominent examples of this, what we're seeing now with players skipping college, since the 2011 rule of one and done took place, was Darius Bazley. And Darius Bazley is now playing for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Last year, I should say 2 years ago, he would have been in the same position as Jalen Green and Isaiah Todd, where he now has to make a decision. Is he going to go to college? Is he going to sign for a six-figure contract in the G League? Now, if I wasn't descriptive enough, the G League is the affiliate league of the NBA, almost like a minor league system. Now, it's not like it wouldn't be like the MLB's minor league system, because typically in the MLB, I believe for all teams, each major league team will have usually a single A, double A, triple A team, and that is part of their farm system of their team. The NBA does not have a dedicated G League team for each NBA team. So this is something I think that they're looking to work on by adding very talented players, by increasing potentially the viewership of the G League, increasing the attendance of the G League. They're able to gain more revenue, and we could see potentially every NBA team now having a minor league team, also what is known in the NBA as a G League team. It'll be interesting to see what these two players, as well as Darius Bazley, as I mentioned, 2 years ago, he found himself in a similar position. He decided to not go to college, forego his NCAA eligibility, and ended up signing a G League contract. Now, not only did he sign a G League contract, but by foregoing his eligibility in the NCAA, Darius Bazley was eligible to sign sponsorship agreements, right? As an NCAA athlete, you're not allowed to if you have a sponsorship agreement, you're therefore considered a professional athlete, and the NCAA is in the business of amateur athletes. So now there's a whole other debate whether NCAA athletes, athletes of all kinds should be paid. I'm hoping to get to that in a later show, a later video. But you have to think about it, right? Darius Bazley clearly wanted to make some money. He signed a sponsorship agreement with New Balance, and it was deemed an internship. So in the articles that I was reading and some of the interviews, they referred to New Balance giving him an internship. interesting that they would do that. I guess trying to downplay, it being a sponsorship agreement at the time because he's a G League player. If anybody wants to tell me a little bit more about that, feel free in the comments section. But he signed a $1 million, or he signed a sponsorship agreement that would pay him $1 million guaranteed, up to $14 million with New Balance. So I don't know how, if he's able to restructure that contract based on performance and things like that, but he was able to secure 7 figures from a sponsorship deal and an additional $125,000 from the G League. Many NCAA athletes are not able to do this. Basketball players they're just not able to receive any money in terms of playing basketball, as that's the rule that the NCAA holds to maintain the idea of amateurism and authenticity of amateurism. So it'll be interesting to see how this changes. Recently, the NCAA, I believe last year, changed the rules, which allows some high school prospects to have agents, because before they would not be allowed to have agents, and I believe until they declared for the draft, they couldn't even have, they weren't even allowed to have an agent. So questions this whole system of amateurism and what kind of impact this will have in the future in terms of NCAA basketball. March Madness is a $1 billion event. And, if they're losing some of the top prospects out of high school, this could have an impact on viewership, an impact on attendance. I'm not saying that, because these 2 players decided not to play in the NCAA, that all of a sudden March Madness is going to fold and it's going to be worse. March Madness is still going to be March Madness, but if these 2 players and there's some other players that are beginning to follow suit, is my understanding. If next year even more players continue to do it, who knows what could happen with NCAA basketball. The NFL is a little bit more protected in this case because they have a rule which states that college players, university players that play for an NCAA team must, or not the NCAA that has this rule, but like I said, the NFL has this rule that those players must complete 3 years at a university. This could mean that they can redshirt their first year, which would mean that their second year, instead of it being their sophomore season, it would then be their redshirt freshman season. So it'll be interesting to see if the NFL changes the rules from the required 3 years to be draft eligible. Maybe some players will find somewhere else to play. The XFL was in existence, and I understand that players can't be drafted out of the XFL, but things could change, right? If the NFL decides to build a minor league system and they want to start making more profit instead of sending players to college, who knows what can happen now. This could be a whole new trend for NBA and NFL, and there's many question marks, surrounding what what's happening with NHL draft eligibility. And the CA, I'm not a big hockey fan, but I have written some papers regarding this topic of what's happening in terms of amateurism in the Canadian Hockey League with the Quebec Minor Junior Hockey League. I believe QMJHL is what it's referred to as, the OHL Ontario Hockey League, and the Western Hockey League, which form the CHL. I know that there has been lawsuits against the CHL from former players, and I know there's the most famous case of that is Sam Berg, and who is the son of former Leaf player Bill Berg, and they're part of a class action lawsuit of players which are seeking compensation not only for themselves but for the players of the future that play in the OHL, and this lawsuit is being left with the provincial government. I don't know if it's been resolved, but I know that it was mentioned by the provincial government, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. The claim and the argument for the players is that they believe that they should be considered. They're already making a few $100s a week. They're being paid. Those players do not fall under the employment standards agreements of Ontario, so they are not able to claim employment insurance or anything like that. So it'll be interesting if they'll be successful in getting their request for minimum wage, but both the government are trying to work through this, and obviously the CHL is opposed to this idea. I mean, they're trying to work through something that's best for the players, but there's a lot of question marks in terms of the legality of amateur drafts. Back in 1936, when the NFL had their first when they had their first draft, amateur draft, the idea was founded through the Philadelphia Eagles owner in 1936, who had just finished a 1935 season 2-9, and or one of the previous seasons 2-9. I know that the Eagles had a losing record during that time period, and the owner wanted more competitive balance. All of the teams that were more rich were able to sign better players. There wasn't an opportunity for some of those teams that weren't performing as well to sign the top players, and this happened in the MLB in the 60s and 70s with Rick Reinhardt, who signed the biggest contract in MLB history at the time, I believe in 1976, or around that time period, or 67. I could be messing up the date, but he signed with the St. Louis Cardinals, and that 1963 Rick Reinhardt signed with the St. Louis Cardinals, and I believe it was the most lucrative contract that any MLB player had seen for the next it was 10 plus years that at least 10 plus years that another MLB player had signed for as much money. And some teams that were at the bottom felt this was unfair, and eventually the MLB put it to a vote, and I believe they had their first draft in 1965, so it came 2 years after Rick Reinhardt signing, or 1 year after. But the MLB, they took it to a vote with the owners of the teams, and only 4 teams didn't vote on this, and the amateur draft was passed, and this is now this universal draft system, which is being used among the 4 major professional sport leagues in North America. So I just wanted to also say that most of this information is coming from some of the work that I did this past year at Brock University. I'm a student, just finished my 3rd year as a sport management undergraduate, and looking to obviously graduate next year. But I just finished a study with one of my professors. Shout out to Professor Hyatt. You've been a great mentor for me in terms of my writing skills and trying to get better and as a student overall. So thank you to you. But we focused on a research project for those who are interested on the impact of amateur drafts and all-star games and what they mean to professional sport. And when I say professional sport, with the focus of the 4 major North American professional sport leagues. So, I mean, there's no doubt that in terms of the amateur draft, the NFL hadn't made money in the past. In some years doing the draft, they were apparently breaking even. They weren't selling tickets. Now they are selling tickets. But the amateur drafts, they have a huge impact, and it'll be interesting with the changes that are coming to the NBA, because drafts are not only great for the league, but they're great for the cities which they're hosted in. The 2018 NFL draft in Arlington, Texas saw $100 million in economic impact for the city of Arlington, according to the mayor of Arlington. And in 2019, so 1 year later, in Nashville, it had a $224 million economic impact. So there's no doubt that the draft not only has a big impact financially. I mean, 600,000 fans attended the outdoor draft in 2019 in the streets of Nashville, Tennessee. So it'll be pretty interesting to see what effect a move like this by two NBA players this year and one NBA player last year will have on the future. I personally see major changes coming in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of the amateur draft, and I honestly wouldn't be surprised in the next 20 years if some leagues didn't even have an amateur draft, or players didn't end up going to college anymore and they just started signing the G League contracts or some other amateur a league that was deemed amateur to the point where players were draft eligible. That could come about, but I see major changes mainly in the NBA and for sure potentially in the NFL as well coming to their amateur drafts. But let me know what you think about this video. Hopefully some of these points have piqued your interest. If there's anything else you'd like to hear about amateur drafts, let me know, because I did a bunch of research on the history and the evolution of both the amateur draft and as well as the All-Star game, which is popular in sports. So if there's any things that you want me to speak about from those two topics, I'd love to. But for now, thank you very much.